I don't know if you can see, you've got two red a picture there. You've got the lion, which is the Lion of Judah. That is actually the emblem of Judah. And you got the red hand of Sarah, or Zara, Judah. And Sarah or Zara was actually the son of Judah, and is very popular in Ireland, and is still very pretty much identified today. You know, if you look into the history of Ulster, many other countries in Irish or Ireland, you will see the red hand of Zara been very much presented in those parts of Ireland. And so there is a lot of connection in history about the movement of the descendants of Judah, etc., through their sons. And so we got Judah there, the lion, which is his emblem, and obviously is also connected to the Bible. The picture in the middle, that's actually the picture of Jesus Christ coming back to claim the throne of his father David. And he talks about in the book of Luke, he shall be great, that is Jesus, and shall be called the Son of the Highest, and the Lord God shall give unto him the throne of his father David. And he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there shall be no end. And obviously that's a prophecy that was prophesied in the Old Testament, the coming of the Messiah, Jesus Christ, throughout his birth, through Joseph and Mary. They're both also the descendants of Judah. And as he continued to have his ministry upon the earth, and he talks about here the second coming of Jesus Christ to claim the power, to claim the throne of his father David, also come and to reign over the house of Jacob forever. So he's going to be taking control throughout in reality, if you like, when he comes back to take the church. And so the house of Jacob here, it's also identified the descendants of Jacob, which is they become to be baptized and spirit-filled with the day of Pentecost. That's all the category of the house of Jacob. It doesn't necessarily mean the house of Jacob as in the Old Testament time. It's relating to the descendants of Jacob when they were waiting at the upper chamber, the 12 apostles, they were part of the house of Jacob. Likewise also the 3,000 Jews, they were baptized and spirit-filled. They are also part of the house of Jacob. Later on, 5,000 were added into the church at the beginning of the book of Acts. So I think it's good to identify and to not to have the misinterpretation of the scriptures when we're talking about to rule over the house of Jacob. The house of Jacob is also now the church. We are part of the house of Jacob as the Gentile, because Paul did take the gospel to the Gentile world, and automatically we become to be the house of Jacob or the church. And on the bottom left, we see the Queen, Queen Elizabeth. And how does the Queen fit into the line of Judah? And so we're going to look into this presentation. It says here in Genesis 49, it says, the scepter shall not depart from Judah. Now, Judah here, of course, we're talking about the same Judah. It's not another, there's no two Judah or three Judah in the Bible. There is only one Judah, which is very much popular throughout the Bible. And Judah has got a huge tribe, and they occupy the southern part of Israel. And that's where the major event of the house of Israel, the 10 tribes, was very much involved in that area. We got the Passover, we got the time of the building of the temple, the time of the Israel to come down to worship in Jerusalem was in the area of Judah, because God had actually given the inheritance to him and his descendant, and out of Judah came out Jesus Christ, of course, as far as the Bible is concerned. Okay, so those just the brief identity or the brief picture of the line of Judah, which is we see Jesus fit into that, and also Queen Elizabeth fit into that, and we also got the descendants of the Irish Zara line also fit into that according to prophecy. So we're going to go back in the beginning. Where's the beginning of course? Okay, I'll go back. Right, I think I can control it. So the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, so this is, as far as our fellowship has gone, I think this is quite an important subject. Like I said, this is one of our this is actually the foundation of our beliefs, Bible prophecy. we believe the Bible declares this. And the descendants of all these people are now filling over the face of the earth. You know, if you look into many churches and so on, if you ask anybody or a ministry of religion or some local vicar, a vicar in the local community, or etc., etc., if you ask them, who is Israel today? Who is Judah today? Or who's the Jews? Who's this? They've got no clue at all. But what we do know is the Bible really explains it more clearly who they are and how do they fit in according to the Bible and where are their movement. And a lot of people still argue the fact that, you know, Israel is the Jews today who live in Israel. No, the Bible doesn't say that. You know, the Jews who are living in Israel today, they are the descendants also of Judah. But what about Israel? And that's the other thing as well, which is where perhaps we can be challenged, or maybe perhaps from now and again, you and I can still a little bit sidetrack or uncertain and unsure, because as we go along, we intend to forget, don't we? You know, as saints. But as I said, this is the foundation of our belief, Bible prophecy. It says here, the 12 tribes of Israel, we got the sons of Jacob. Jacob had 2 wives, and obviously he had also an extra 2 as well. We got Rachel and Leah, those are his 2 wives, and the concubine also here, Zipporah and Bilhah. And throughout his marriage appear the children of Israel, or the sons of Jacob, as you see in the picture there. And you can see there, this is a little, it's just a little outline here. Through Leah, the wife of Jacob, appear the sons of Jacob, and through Judah comes down here King David, and obviously down to Jesus Christ. And obviously we're going to look into that as we go along, etc., etc. But here in Genesis chapter 35 rather, it says 23, it says the son of Leah, Reuben, Jacob, firstborn, and Simeon and Levi and Judah and Issachar and Zebulun. So those are the 4 sons of Jacob through Leah, and appear Judah. And it says there in the middle, at the bottom rather, it says the 10 tribes taken to Assyria. So obviously, as time goes along, they came out of Jacob has to move his sons to go back to the land of Canaan. And while he was in the area, there was a famine in the land, and he has to send his 12th son apart from Joseph, was already in Egypt, and is to send the rest of his son to go and bag corn. But on this time, they didn't realize that Joseph was already in power in Egypt, because the brother of Jacob, the brother of Joseph, talking about Reuben and the rest of his other brother, they sold, or they set an ambush against their brother Joseph, and they've actually put him in the tip somewhere on their way in the area. And then, as far as the Genesis is concerned, and he was eventually got sold into Egypt through the descendants of Ishmael. So as the brothers of Joseph go and bag the Egyptians or Pharaoh to get some corn to take it back to the land of Canaan, they didn't realize the person that they were talking to was Joseph. So Joseph becomes to be very powerful at the time. And so that's as far as the Bible is concerned. But we're gonna look into further. We're gonna go to the next slide. And he talks about here in Genesis 49. He says, Judah, thou art whom thy brethren shall praise. Thy hand shall be in the neck of thy enemies. Thy father's children shall bow down before thee. So this is the blessing. Just before Jacob, their father, he was actually on his deathbed, and he was blessing his 12th son. And Judah was one of them. And if you look into Genesis 49, it talks about all the blessings that their father Jacob has to bless each and every one of them before he died. And the blessing pretty much stands out, and the blessing also very much fulfilled in what has to be fallen upon their descendants as individuals. And that carries on as they come and take the promised land, and eventually the 10 tribes they become outnumbered, and they were taken away to Syria. The 10 tribes, they continue to be shifted through the nation, and eventually they landed up into Britain. And that's just another story there as far as the Bible's prophecy is concerned. But coming back here to Judah in verse 9, it says, Judah is a lion well from the prey. My son, thou art gone up. He stood down. He couched as a lion, as an old lion. Whoso rose him up. The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh, which is Jesus. Come unto him shall the gathering of the people be. So we see here back in Genesis, there's a promise God given to Judah and his descendant. It talks about that he will be the royal line, he will be a king over them, and he will have the scepter, which represents power and authority. And it talks about also, throughout his descendant come Jesus Christ, of course, and then Jesus here will come and take up the power and all the authority, and that's where all the gathering of the people be, the church, the gathering of the church, according to the gospel age, to the coming of Jesus. So we see here there is a wonderful connection of the blessing that God given to Judah. It's unbroken. You know, it's unbroken until Jesus comes to fulfill that. And also Jesus obviously talks about that he ended up dying on the cross for the sin of every man and women, and that he will also come back again and take up the power. Next scripture here in Genesis 46, just looking into Judah a little bit more depth, and his sons, it says here, and the sons of Judah was and Onan and Shelah and Perez and Zerah. But the other two of his sons, and Onan, died in the land of Canaan. And the sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamul. Now, Perez has got sons. Likewise, Zerah as well. You know, if we dwell a little bit more on Zerah's line, there's a lot of history about his movement until they landed up into Ireland. But obviously we look up to that later. But if we come back here to Judah, their fathers, which is the son of Jacob, and if you look into this couple of a picture here, you got on the left, we got Abraham before Judah, before Jacob. We go back to Abraham. Now Abraham, the Bible talks about he was a father of many nations. God made a covenant with Abraham. He made him to through Abraham. He talks about many nations will partake of his blessing, and no wonder why the whole nation during the time of Abraham, as far as Bible prophecy is concerned, in Genesis, now a majority of people from different walks of life has partaking the blessings of Abraham. No wonder why many nations who represent perhaps the mark of Israel, they become more wealthy, and life becomes to be very simple, and people have got so many wealth. Those are the blessing, the natural blessing. But the spiritual blessing, it passed on to the church. Men must be born again of the water and of the Spirit. But sadly, the whole world don't see that. According to prophecy, that's just the way it's been set up. It's the way that God designed. But mankind have actually led to error. But Abraham, God given a promise, God made him a promise, and the promise was passed on to Isaac. And later on, the promise was passed on to Jacob. And the same promise was passed on to Joseph. And then from Joseph, the son of Jacob, was passed on to his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And then obviously here, Manasseh and Ephraim, again, they also represent the 10 tribes. But again, that's another different thing altogether. But through their descendants come down Great Britain, and also the company of nation, which is Ephraim. No wonder why Britain have got a commonwealth of nations, have got other nations subjected under the power of the United Kingdom. But on the further left, you see there Judah. We come down the royal house of David, this line, and on the other side come down the Jews. So the Jews was the descendants of Judah. The Jews was also called as an Israelite, but they were called the descendants of Judah. They were nothing to do with what many other churches identify the Jews today as Israel. No, it's wrong. That's not what the scriptures say. According to understanding and the knowledge of the word of God, the Jews are the descendants of Judah. The Jews who are living today in Israel. And then on the other end, we got the royal house of David. And through the royal house of David, up here on the right hand, we got the Messiah, Jesus Christ. And then on the right hand, rather, we got a Solomon, the son of David. And up here, the natural, the natural throne, which still exists today. But obviously, we got the spiritual side, Jesus Christ, which is also will come back and to claim that power, the throne from his father David, which is currently still exists today through the Queen Elizabeth II. So those are the connection. Those are the connection, just giving us an overview. And on the right here, the promises of God. We got Abraham, just showing us a similar thing, just to sort of clarify a little bit more detail. We got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Israel. And then you got Joseph, the son of Jacob. And then goes down to Ephraim and Manasseh, the descendants, and Israel captivity, the 10 tribes. And then eventually come to the British Isles as the United Kingdom, or the British, or the Anglo-Saxon people, as far as history is concerned, as far as Bible prophecy is concerned, and the time connection and all these other things can discuss and fit into the Bible. And it's just an accurate prophecy of the identity or the mark of Israel. And we got Judah, King David, King Solomon, King Zedekiah, the last king of Judah, and down we got the king's daughter, which is Zedekiah's daughter. Eventually, it talks about in Jeremiah, her and prophet Jeremiah, because of the time when Nebuchadnezzar began to overrule Jerusalem and take control and become powerful. And Jeremiah knew that the throne of David has to be still very much exists. He knew about that, Jeremiah. He knew that the covenant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has to move on because God can fulfill his promise according to Abraham as becomes to be the multitude of nations through his great-grandchildren, Jacob, through the son of Jacob comes down to the nation. So, I don't know if this makes sense, but anyway, those are the things that Jeremiah very much aware of. He's aware of that, and he has to flee, take over the daughter of Zedekiah, and eventually they landed in Ireland. And during the time when Zedekiah's daughter was taken, history recorded that he was actually taking the throne of King David and also the heart of David, and eventually landed in Ireland. And when she was in Ireland, she got caught up with another Judah line through Zerah, the son of Judah, and eventually they got married through the descendants of that line, and that's how the king of our Ireland continued to raised up in that line, and eventually continued to flourish in the Irish king. Okay, so we're going to go to the next slide. Right, okay, the migration of Dada and Calcol Zara. Now, these are the sons of Zara now. Zara, the son of Judah. Okay, now it talks about it here in 1 Chronicles chapter 2. It says, and the son of Zara, Zimri and Ethan and Heman and Calcol and Dara. So Calcol and Dara, very, these two names, you can look it up into the history of Ireland. You will see these two names appear, which is the sons of Zerah, which is the grandchildren of Judah. It says, far from them all, it says Zimri, it meant trouble or troublesome. Ethan, to continue, permanence. Heman, faithful, so they all got the meaning in the concordance. Calcol, wealth, riches, strength, and treasure. And Dada, pearl of knowledge. And no wonder why the Irish, there's a lot of other, there's a lot of history in Ireland. When we went in Ireland not long ago, I think it was this year, wasn't it? Yeah, when we were in Ireland, why can I personally identify? There's a lot of history there. There's broken castle, there's fallen castle, there's this and that. There's some really old things hanging around, and it's connected to the movement of the descendants of Israel. There's a lot of history in Ireland, and obviously there's a lot in that. But it's just something here according to the scriptures. And also there's a little statement here from the history. It says a group of Israelites began to migrate away from the main body before the Israel nation was formed, while as the people they were still in bondage in Egypt. So this is talking about Zerah line, okay? Because Zerah, you'll see his name appeared only in Genesis, the birth of the children of Judah, and also here we see here his descendants in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, which is they become to be the grandchildren of Judah. You'll never see Zerah again anymore in the Bible, because there's a scriptures we're going to look into later. It believes that he was migrated over to Ireland through the British waters, landed in the Irish land. And he talks about this, a history evidence here. He says, one of these groups under the leadership of Calcol, a prince of the tribe of Judah, went westward across the Mediterranean, eventually settling in Ulster, Ireland, and another under the leadership of Dardanus, a brother of Calcol, across to Asia Minor to found a kingdom later known as Troy in ancient Britain. So that's just sort of giving us an overview of the book that was actually bringing out from this Israel. Is something connected with a Jewish historian. Can't remember his name was now, but this is just an overview, just to give an idea about the descendants of Zerah through his son Calcol and Dara. Their movement, whereabouts are they? And obviously, that's the connection. Okay, so it's around about 164,000 BC on the time. It says Deuteronomy chapter 29, in verse 14, it says, neither you only do I make this covenant and this all, but with him that standeth here with us this day before the Lord our God, and also with him that is not here with us this day. So this is quite an interesting verse here. This is Moses speaking to the 12 tribes of Israel. Moses was actually passing on the covenant, reminding the children of Israel about the covenant that God has made Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and throughout the nation of Israel, which is now. And he's saying also here that the covenant is not just for you guys, but also for those who are not here with us. So the covenant was also passing on to the descendants of Zerah line, which is the grandchildren of Judah, talking about Calcol and Dada. So that's, the covenant was also part of that, because there's a covenant that God made to Abraham and Isaac, and was actually passed on to Jacob, and Jacob continued to bless them. How Judah going to become to rule and to migrate, and also how to perhaps to pass on the blessing to his descendant as a throne of Israel. You know, the throne of Israel wasn't actually wiped off during the time of of Nebuchadnezzar. The throne of Israel was actually moved on to Ireland through prophet Jeremiah and Zedekiah's daughter, which Zedekiah was the last king of Judah. It moved on because there's scriptures about the overturn of the throne of Israel. We're going to see that later. And it's just sort of here an overview or a picture, just to give you the movement of the descendants of the grandchildren of Judah, according to the promise that Jacob made it to him. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. So Jeremiah knew about all this, and he has to take the daughters, Zedekiah's daughter, to move on elsewhere because of the pressure of what's going on in Babylon on the time. So Jeremiah knew all about this, all these things, the migration of Golgotha. So this red arrow here, as you see, that's just to show us the migration of the descendants of Dada and Calcol, and their children move on from the land of Israel, and they go across the Mediterranean, and as far as the other slide of actually concerned, the movement of them they end up living in Ireland. Okay, so that's a Zerah line. Okay, now we haven't actually looked into Perez. Perez was also the son of Judah. Okay, now bearing in mind the scripture did say is that the rest of the son of Judah died. Only two was actually written in the Bible. One of them his descendant, migrated to Ireland, and the other one, Perez, we haven't mentioned that. So we're going to look into Perez later. Yeah, this is just the mark of Dada, and his descendant. He says Dada. He says here, founder of Troy. Troy is, most of us are very familiar with the history. He says Troy of Dada is about 1,200 BC. Troy was attacked by the Greeks. Some fled to Scandinavia and established themselves there. Descendants of Dada are connected to the Danish royalty. Okay, so that's where the Danish royal or the Danish king came in. Okay, so it says took the remnants of his nation. It says Brutus. If you go to Devon, sorry, I was in Devon the other day. Where was it? I think I've gone far. I'll go back. Sorry, apologize. Go back. Now, I'm just going to show you here. I don't know if you see. Can everybody see the Brutus stone? Brutus was the descendant of Zara through Dada. Brutus actually came to the British Isles, through the British Isles, landed up in Cornwall. And there's a stone there still very much represented him. And it still exists today. If you go to Cornwall, I think in Newquay, if you go through the town of Newquay, I think Newquay, where they do all the skis and everything, you will come across this stone here, Brutus stone. It's very old. We're talking about a lot of many years back. The descendants of the movement of the descendants of Kelkol and Dada through Zerah, the grandson of Judah. So this one here, just a little map here, the Dandelers, and as I said, there's a lot of history, the connection of the descendants of the movement of these people. I'll take you to the next one. Mark of Zerah, Judah through Kelkol. So that was actually, we saw Dada, one of the son of Zerah, and through the previous slide, through Dada come Brutus and the other descendants of the descendants of Dada. Now, if you go to Europe, or if you look into Europe now these days, there's a lot of line in Europe. Yeah, a lot of line. You got the Dutch line, you got the Spanish line, you got all these other lines. All the European, most European countries. There's a lot there. It's good to actually see how does the line get into there. How does all these other countries have got a symbol, or in their flag, or in their heritage, or whatever it is? How does the line fit into that? I mean, one of the questions we can ask: how does Britain have got a line on its, the line in the unicorn on the coat of arms of England, and how come there was line in the Netherlands in the coat of arms? So there must be a connection about that. But what we do know is in Bible prophecy, there's certainty about the Irish line. The Irish, like the Harp of David and the Red Hand of Sarah. There is certainty about that. There's a great evidence and connection that relates back to Zerah, the son of Judah. And it says in here, Kelkol fled west to Spain, Iberia, and founded the city of Zaragoza, which is modern-day Spain. It says Rev eventually arrived in Ireland, a land of the Hebrews. Kelkol was their king. This descendant of Zerah, Judah, founded the kingdom of Ulster shortly after their arrival, and from that time until the present matter of nearly 3,600 years, the emblem of Ulster has been a red hand circled with a scarlet cord, symbols of our Celto-Saxon. And that's just the quote from the W.H. Bennett 1985. So that's just the picture, the bottom map, showing the movement of Kelkol Judah. Kelkol, again, the grandson of Judah. Yeah. So that's just the descendants of Kelkol in Ireland. The Irish history, Jeremiah and the princess. They're talking about, I did mention about Jeremiah taking the prince, the daughter of Zedekiah. Now, talking about that, the Bible did talk about that if a man died, it says in Numbers, the inheritance has to pass on to the women or the sister or the lady or the female, you know, within the family, within the royal line. No wonder why we got Queen Elizabeth sitting over the throne, because the Bible did say that. The Bible did say that if a man died and the inheritance has to move on to pass on to the women. So Zedekiah's daughter, she was the only person survived during the time of captivity, during the time of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. Jeremiah has to take her. Jeremiah knew about the connection. So that's how prophecy unfolded and eventually got connected in the Irish king. And he says here, Book of the Chronicles of Erin in the Trinity College Library in Dublin, Sir James, writing on the ancient Irish history, says the Irish nation possess a genuine history several centuries more ancient than any other European nation possesses. And its present spoken language in the Chronicles, it says, we read here in the history that they call the tale of Leah Fail. It's actually relating to the daughter of Zedekiah, basically. It says, Leah tells us, Leah Fail, which means stone wonderful, it was the Irish name of Jacob Stone. He says, which was rescued from the Babylonians by Jeremiah and brought by him to Ireland, together with Zedekiah's daughter, the royal prince. So that's just telling us the quote on that particular page. He says, we find an interesting reference to the fact that a certain king called Iber, the firstborn of Er, was chosen to rule over Ulad or Ulster. Was the name that Judah's firstborn elder brother of Zerah, from whom the early Irish settlers were descended. The Hebrew name it says what there, arrest, yes, attention, because the Irish are known as Iberians or the Eri. I don't know if I pronounce Eri right, and their land is known as the Erin. This demonstrates the historical links between the Hebrews in Palestine and the descendants in Ireland. So the stone, the stone, and obviously the Harp of David, it believes to be taken by the daughter to Ireland with Jeremiah, and obviously the stone, is not in Ireland. The stone now is in England. It's kept in Scotland, but obviously the stone was actually moved forward from Scotland, and the overturning of the stone through the Irish king to the Scottish king, and come down to Westminster Abbey, where the king of the English king was crowned. Okay, so anyway, we'll go to the next one. We'll look into Judah now. Later on, we're going to go to Perez, which is one of the sons of Judah. So we've actually looked into the son of Judah, Zerah, and their descendants, and where they are today. And now we're going to move on to Judah a little bit, and then we're going to go to Perez, another son of Judah. It says, now these are the generation of Perez. Perez begat Hezron, and Hezron begat Rem, and Rem begat Amminadab, and later on he begat Nashon, and Nashon begat Salmon, and Salmon begat Boaz, and Boaz begat Obed, and Obed begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David. So that's where we read about David today, haven't we? David taking control over the king of Israel after Saul has died in the book of Samuel. Talks about here Judah. So Judah, again, just to remind you, Judah was the son of Jacob. And then Judah, we got the two well-known sons. We got Zerah and Perez. And obviously on the left, we got Zerah and their son. We got Kelkol and Dada and Heber and Heramon. Heramon, the king, he was the king of Ireland and ended up married the daughter of Zedekiah. But if you stick on the left, through Dada come down the Trojan kings and the kings of Denmark. Okay, is that understandable? Yeah, there's a different thing there, but we're going to look into this too later, which comes down here, Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth. Now on the right, you got Perez, which is the son of Judah, come down King David, and the last king of Judah was Zedekiah. Now you might think, what about Solomon? What about Jeroboam? Not Jeroboam. Jeroboam was in Israel. What about Abijah? What about all these other king of Judah? What about Joaz and Asa? Well, I'm just cutting their names, otherwise we'll be all night. So David, and the last king of Judah was Zedekiah, and obviously the daughter of Zedekiah was Tephi, and then go to Ireland, and eventually met another royal house of Judah, Heraman, and then they married, and that's where the kings of Ireland was started, and then eventually becomes to be the king of Scott, and eventually the king, or the English kings, right down to our Queen Elizabeth. Okay, so these are some of the overview about Perez, descendants of Perez, Judah. So we got David again, and obviously I put Solomon up there. And so from Solomon, the last king of Judah was Zedekiah. That's where the earthly throne, where the Queen Elizabeth came out to, that line. And in the middle, through Solomon as well, through the descendant of Solomon, you got Jaconians. This is, if you read the book of Matthew, it talks about the descendants of Jesus, Matthew and Luke. And you see Nathan and Joseph, and obviously came down Jesus Christ. And on the right here, David has also got a son. His name was Nathan. And through Nathan, he came Zerubbabel, Levi, and Mary. And obviously, Jesus Christ was all, because Mary and Joseph, they will both come from the descendant of Judah, and come down Jesus Christ, our Savior. And he is the one who walks the earth. He was the one who was prophesied back in Genesis 49. And he talks about here the connection of the Judah line, generation of Judah to Jesus. Okay, so that's from the Phares side, yeah. Hopefully you're not getting confused. So that slide that we saw there, that's from the Phares line. Phares line come down the Queen. The Phares line also come down Jesus Christ. Yeah, it's nothing to do with Zerah line. Okay, Zerah line, we'll see it anyway. He talks about here in Ezekiel chapter 21, it talks about here, there's a prophecy about the overturn of the throne, the throne of Judah, or the throne of David, for example. He says, I will overturn and overturn and overturn it. It shall be no more until Jesus come, whose right it is, and I will give it to him. So this is a prophecy in the time of Ezekiel, back in the Old Testament. The Bible did talk about here, there will be an overturn. In other words, we'll move on from one nation to another. And the first overturn was actually from Jerusalem to Ireland. That's been fulfilled. The king's daughter, Judah to Ireland with Jeremiah. There's just a little boat there. They were just paddling across the Mediterranean Sea. Eventually, they reached the British waters and merged into Ireland. And the second overturn was from Ireland to the Scottish king. Came up to Scotland. Yeah, Ireland to Scotland. That was 498 AD. And then obviously the third overturn was from Scotland to England. I think it was King Edward got crowned. It says here is in 1296 AD, and eventually from that came down Queen Elizabeth. For many other queens and kings before her, but that was actually the prophecy of Ezekiel chapter 21, the overturn of the throne of David, and it's been fulfilled. It's very interesting to see how prophecy and history unfold. It says here, Isles beyond the sea by Tyre. It says about Jonah, the son of Kerah. This is in Jeremiah. Took all the remnant of Judah, even men and women and children, and the king's daughters, and Jeremiah the prophet, and Baruch, the son of Nerah. So they came into the land of Egypt, for they obeyed not the voice of the Lord. The nation whom I will send thee. This is what God said to Jeremiah. The kings of Tyre and the kings of the isles, which are beyond the sea. It's very interesting that when the Bible mentioned about the British Isles or the Isles upon the sea, it's mainly referring to the British Isle or the British waters. That's what it is. That's where Jeremiah will go through, go through to take the king's daughter and eventually land up into Ireland. And then from there, the stone was overturned to Scotland. And you got the first Scottish king, believes to be the what is it called? Not the Viking, not the Norman, but it's what's the other part of the Anglo-Saxon history? I can't remember now. I think I've got it in another slide. Okay, so so those are the picture of the scepter of Judah, and the royal house of Judah and Sarah. So we got Judah on top, and then you got the Perez line on the right and the Sarah line on the left, and comes down, the kings of Denmark, kings of Greece, and comes down to Philip. And on the right here, Perez, you got David, you got Solomon, and comes down to the King of Ireland, King of Scotland, and right down to the House of Windsor, Queen Elizabeth. And on the right side of David, you got Nathan, and came down the Virgin Mary, also Joseph as well, Jesus Christ, the royal house of Judah. Here on the right is the Levite. That's further on the right. That's just another connection through the royal house of Judah, which is kind of like another thing to look at it as well. But the main thing here, it's about looking at the descendants of Judah through David, through Perez and Sarah, and the connection of the two, which comes down to Queen Elizabeth, and also Jesus Christ, and also the kings of Denmark. Okay, so Judah and Ephraim, the united kingdom. The Bible did say that when the 10 tribes they were shifted through the nation, God will punish them 7 times because of the disobedience. And it talks about that they were shifted through the nation 2,500 years. So that's a long time for the punishment of Israel, the 10 tribes only. It's nothing to do with Judah just yet, because the house of Israel, they were very rebellious. They were idolatry. They are the one who, disobedience to God first before the house of Judah, and then they were taken away by the Assyrians. And then as they were further up in the Middle East, in Assyria, they were sifted through the nation. And if you look through the book of Hosea and the minor prophet, it talks about the movement of the 10 tribes, led by Ephraim. Ephraim becomes to be the leading tribe of the 10 tribe. And, and as they shifted through the nation, they end up migrating through Europe and end up coming in to Britain. And as they were coming in, the Roman was in control. And the more they're coming in, the Anglo-Saxon coming in, and eventually they push out the Romans, because the Roman has to go back and defend their own country back in Italy, because there was a war going on there on that side as well. And eventually, the royal house, the line of Judah, also coming in, later on. We see that there's a history of the connection of the, the Battle of Hastings. William the Conqueror believes to be all the royal house of Judah, and he was the one who bring in the line of Judah in England. And so that's where the fulfillment of this prophecy in Ezekiel chapter 37. Jacob, we got Judah and Joseph, which is his 2 sons. From Joseph comes the 10 tribes led by Ephraim, and then they end up coming to Britain. And then on Judah, the royal line, King David through Queen Elizabeth, and Queen Elizabeth now ruling over the nation, and also the commonwealth of nation, the promise that God given right back to Abraham. And we see here that God kept his promise. God never failed. God, whatever God says, it will fulfill. It will become to fruition. And it's just good to see the connection of the two. So we see here, if the British people, a lot of British people trace back their, trace back their ancestors and so on. But sadly, they got no clue about the connection of history, the movement of where does the British people come from? How does Britain become very, there's a lot of things about Britain, in history. Why does Britain win many wars and all these other things? Why is the lion, representing the coat of arms of England? Why is a unicorn representing the coat of arms? There's no lion in England. Where does all this come from? how come, the Queen is so powerful, ruling over many other nations as a Commonwealth nation. The people in it, they've got no clue whatsoever. They've got no clue whatsoever, And what we do know here is a prophecy of the ending of the seven-time punishment of Israel and Judah. They come back to a place where the royal house of David, the throne of David, overruling, his own people, Israel. And likewise also, America is also part of it as well. In Ezekiel 37, it says, "Moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it for the Judah and for the children of Israel, his companions." So we see here, it talks about here, God has gave a promise to Judah. He is still going to be a king. He's still going to be in power, but he will rule over his companions, which means his brethren. His brethren became to form the nation of Israel on the southern part, the northern part of Israel, isn't it? If you look through the book of Kings, the house of Israel was represented by Ephraim on the north. And who was representing the one on the south? Judah. And because of the disobedience, Nebuchadnezzar is to come and to punish the Jews. The Assyrians is to come and to punish and take them, and they were shifted through the nation. And where they come back to fulfill it, back in the British Isles in the world today, and all this other. It's just very interesting to see the connection of the two. And he goes on to say in the very last verse, he says, "I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king over to them all, and they shall be no more two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms anymore at all." So there used to be, in the Bible, it talks about, the nation of Israel, they were divided, weren't they? They were divided. They were split up in two, and they will also have constant war among them. And so here, we're talking about here more in modern time now. Obviously, a lot of people seems to see that, England coming out or Britain coming out on the, what do you call this European stuff? What do you call this European stuff?
European Union.
European Union. A lot of religious people believe that it's part of the Bible. No, it's not part of the Bible. The Bible doesn't do anything about England come out of the on the European Union. A lot of religious people, they praise, about that. There's nothing to do with Bible prophecy. We're living in the end times. Jesus is coming back. Jesus has actually promised salvation to all, neither Jew or Gentile. The Queen has to be born of the water and of the Spirit. Likewise, Charles. Likewise, not Charles myself, but anybody has to now to repent. Everyone is now sinning. It doesn't matter whatever, whatever mankind do, whatever color, whatever state of life, whether you're king or whether you're, whatever. The gospel is the gospel. Jesus said, "I'm coming back with fire and vengeance." Everyone has to repent now. Because why? Mankind have actually abused God's power, God's authority, abused all these other things that we're very much aware of. King David never abused the throne when he was sitting over the throne of Israel. He never abused that. But certainly after King David, many other kings has come, the king of Judah, they abused it very badly. Guys like Asa, guys like Josaphat, they were good kings, but they were also not really quite sure how to actually have a really good certainty to be as a king and to be king. And likewise, a modern day authority, a modern day king or queen, all these things, it just becomes to be anti-God. The world is turning upside down. People have got no idea about what prophecy is all about and how things will come to an end. Jesus Christ will come back one day and claim the authority, and he will come and take up the throne because it belongs to him. That belongs to him in the first place. And people now have got no respect towards things. People now have become out of control. They've got no clue about what future holds. And what we do know is Christ is coming back. And the Bible talks about he will come back as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. That's what matters. It talks about in Revelation that he will be leading. He will be take up all the powers and authority. He will become a great leader, Jesus Christ, and his church. So the world is falling apart. But what we can see here, just to give us a clear insight of who's who and how does prophecy and how does things that we see fit into the scriptures. all this has been fulfilled. And the only thing that hasn't fulfilled is the kingdom of God that will come to establish. Then all the people said, okay, that's great. We'll close off now. We'll close off now in prayer. So does anybody have any prayer requests?
We did here because you were doing your checking things at the same time.